Hey there, Pro Church Media community, this is Jason again. In this super fun tutorial, we're going to look at creative animated typography inside of After Effects. We're going to be using displacement maps and masks to create this fun rotating text effect. Then we're going to look at animation inside of nested pre-comps, and finally layer styles and overlays to create a nice stylized look. And the best part is this entire animation uses only 2 keyframes, so it's super simple to pull off, but just a great look. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Okay, so we're here in After Effects, and as always, we're going to start with a new composition, Command N on the keyboard. I'm going to make mine 1080 by 1920, 30 frames a second, and a duration of 15 seconds. I'm going to name the composition Lord Over Everything. You can, of course, change all this to suit whatever needs you have, and hit OK. Okay, so let's start with a background layer. I'm just going to hit Q on the keyboard to bring up my rectangle tool and just draw a rectangle to fill the entire canvas. I'm just going to use this nice deep navy blue and maybe just call this background and then just lock it off. Okay, let's add in our text, Command T on the keyboard to bring up your text tool. I'm going to be using a font called B2, which you can get from Adobe Fonts if you're a Creative Cloud subscriber. It's a great, tall, condensed font that works really well for this type of project, so be sure to check that out. Okay, I'm also going to make sure that it's left aligned in the paragraph panel, so I think everything's good. I'm just going to use a nice bright color for right now. We're going to be adding a layer style later, so the color right now doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to type in here and just start typing. Okay, so at this point, you kind of want to get the text to about the size that you want. You can, of course, change it later, but just to kind of get an idea of where our displacement map is going to be, I think somewhere right around here will be good. I might just hold Command and then just double-click on the Pan Behind tool just to center up my anchor point, and then go to the Align, and then just align it to the center. And so I think that'll be okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll leave our text there for right now. Let's create our displacement map. So you might traditionally use like a gradient ramp or something like that. It's not going to quite get us the look that we want. And so what we want to do is create a new solid, Command Y on the keyboard. And you want to make sure it's a pure white background. So just make sure it's pure white. And I'm just going to call this displace and make sure it's the comp size. Hit OK. I'm going to put this below my text, and I just want to make sure I can see my text on this for right now. And I'm going to grab a rectangle tool by hitting Q on the keyboard and make sure this layer is still selected, and then just draw a mask on this. And kind of somewhere right around here will probably be okay. We'll probably be changing this later. Okay, so now I want to go into my mask properties, which you can just twirl this down or just hit double M to pull those up. And now I just want to make the mask feather something like 120 or so. What's going to be happening is when you get this transition from the white to the black, that's what's going to create that curvature in the displacement map. And so I don't want it to be too much, but I don't want it to be too sharp, or it's going to be a lot sharper than I want. I found that for this particular size of the canvas that something around 120 works pretty well. You can play around with it as you need to later, which is the kind of the beauty of it. So I think, somewhere around 100 or 120, we'll try that out and see what happens. Okay, so now we need to pre-compose this. So just right click and go to pre-compose. And I'm just going to call this displace. And make sure to move the attributes into new composition. You can make it the same duration if you want to, and hit OK. Okay, so now we can use this as our displacement map. We can just put this down below the background. All right, so now we need to work on our text animation. So we need to pre-compose our text. So just right click on that text, go to pre-compose. And then I'm just going to call this text animation. And then I want to make sure to move all the attributes in the new composition, and we'll go ahead and adjust it to the span of the layer and hit OK. Okay, so now we'll open up our text animation pre-comp just by double clicking there. And now I want to basically align this to the top, so I'm just going to hit the align to top button right there. And I actually want to go all the way up there, so I might just need to just drag it up there. I just want the tops of these letters just to hit the top of the canvas there. For the character, instead of having it faux bold, that's probably why it's not going all the way to the top. I want to make sure that's off. So now I can go back to my line and go to the up. There we go. Okay. So now I'm just going to select all of my text here, and then just do Command C, and then just come to the end here and then just do a return on it, and then do Command V to paste it. And so now I'm going to keep that same the leading and everything is the same, and so we'll go with that for right now. All right, so let's come to the beginning of here and hit P on the keyboard to bring up our position, and then just add a keyframe there. And here's the only 2 keyframes we're going to use in the entire project. Then we'll go all the way to the end, and we just want to move this up so that Jesus, that second word Jesus, just touches the top right there. And then we can just do a Command V to paste some more text down there. Then we just want to move this 1 frame past that end so we don't duplicate the frames on the loop, because we want to loop, and we can see maybe we need to move it down just a touch or something like that. And so you can just kind of play with this until you get the seamless loop. That looked a little bit better. I might just maybe I need to go up a bit higher. Let's try that. There's a little bit of a hiccup, and so I might just zoom in and then just pull it down just a bit. Once again, we'll try this out. That looks like it worked pretty well. Okay, so we have our looping text, and so now the great thing about this is we can always just go in here and change up our animation, change up how much text we have, change up what the text is, and it's always going to loop. And so being able to use these nested pre-comps in another composition can be really super useful, especially when we want to make these sorts of changes. Okay, so let's go back to our original composition, and now we have our big text block here. So now we can start to do our text displacement with that displacement map. So with your text animation composition or pre-comp selected, go up to Effect, and then choose Distort, and then choose Displacement Map. Initially, it's going to use the same layer as a displacement map. It's going to look terrible. And so for displacement map layer, you want to choose that displace layer. And now let's set the horizontal displacement to luminance, since we're just using whites to blacks. We can set this to luminance if we want to, but we don't want any vertical displacement. We just want horizontal displacement. And so you can see, when we start to displace it like this, we're starting to get that displacement. We're starting to get that curve, up around there. So let's just do like something like minus 110 or something like that. I think that'll look pretty good. And you can see, it's not quite looking how we want it. So now we need to start adding some masks to this. So let's go ahead and make sure our text layer is selected here. Now hit Q in the keyboard to bring up your masked or your rectangle tool. And then we just want to draw some masks up here at the top. And we want to, well, instead of doing that, let's just draw it here in the center. So we want to kind of basically get our mask to where, that curve kind of looks like it would go, to the background layer, and the same up here. So with this one, I probably need to, have it more like right there. And, so this is really based on your composition size, what your text is, all that kind of stuff. I think I'll go with that for right now. We can always change this later if we need to. And so now as we watch this, you can see we're getting more of that, kind of curvature there at the top. Okay, so let's stylize this a bit more just to make it look a little nicer. Let's grab our rectangle tool again. Again, you can hit Q in the keyboard to bring that up. And let's draw another mask up here. And then for this one, let's set it to subtract. And we can actually pull the top of this probably up a lot higher. And then we'll twirl this down, and for the feather, let's just start feathering this out. And so we want it to basically kind of just feather into that curve. And so that's going to help sell the effect a bit more, because we can't get true curvature inside of After Effects with these layers without some expensive plugins, that is. Okay, so something like that I think will work pretty well. We can duplicate that mask with Command D, and then we'll pull its path down to the bottom. And we just want to kind of get the same sort of effect going on there. And I think that looks pretty good. And of course, the great thing is we can always move these later and tweak it as we need to. And so, yeah, I think it's looking pretty good. Okay, so now we can twirl that back down. Now we need to duplicate this layer to create our background layer. So Command D on the keyboard. And then let's go to our text animation down here. What we want to do with this is just right click and go to Transform and choose Flip Vertical. And we might go ahead and hit T on the keyboard to bring up the opacity and just drop the opacity just so we can see things a bit better. Maybe down to like 38% or so. Then let's just grab the whole layer and move it over here. And you can see we're getting, these are lining up the way they need to, but the curvature is the wrong way. So we just need to go to our displacement map, and instead of -110 or whatever number you have, just do the opposite. So I just want +110. And so now you can see we're starting to get that, it looks like it's actually curving into it. And so as we play this back, since our animation for the text is nested within this pre-comp, any duplicate we make of this is going to have the same animation. So, it saves us a lot of time and effort, especially when we want to change stuff. So now as we play this back, you can see we're starting to get a much more believable looking, text rotation effect there. And so I think that's looking pretty good. And if you wanted to, be really, stylized with this, you could, offset these in time so, it does it differently, but we're just gonna go with this for now. Okay, so I think that's looking good, just to kind of, maybe not have the background layer, competing with the front layer. I think I might go in here and just grab a mask, hit Q on the keyboard to bring up your rectangle tool, and then just draw a mask here kind of in the middle. And I'm gonna set this one to subtract. And then we'll just go into the mask feather and just feather it out really nicely, just so it kind of gets, a lot dimmer here in the middle. And so now it's not going to be competing with the text as much. Okay, so another great thing about, having these nested pre-comps is, I think I want this Jesus is Lord to be bold. So I'm just going to go into my text animation and then just go to every instance of that. And I'm just going to use the, I guess I could use, there might be I guess it doesn't have another style, so I'll just use the bold, the faux bold. And since we already have our animation set up to loop, it should be fine just to use this now. And so I can just go down here and then do this one. That looks good. I'm just gonna make sure it loops properly. Looks like it did. Okay, so now we can close that up, go back, and now all of those changes are made without having to, mess with a whole bunch of, text layers. So it's great. All right, so now we can start to have a little bit of fun with this and stylize it a bit more. So in my original example, I have this kind of isometric perspective going on. So that's pretty easy to pull off. So let's go to our our foreground text layer. We'll go up to Effect, scroll down to Distort, and then choose Transform, which is one of the most useful distortion effects that After Effects has. And so what we want to do is go to the skew and change it to, I think, maybe 30. I guess -30 is what we want. And now you can see we have that, basically that isometric perspective. And for the scale, let's just uncheck uniform scale. And for scale width, we want it to be 88.6. And so now that's going to give us basically our isometric perspective. And so we can just copy that, Command C, and then go to our next text animation layer, Command V, paste it on there. And for the skew, we just want to do 30. And so now we should have that skewing the proper way. And now we can just grab that text animation layer and then just, reposition it, so it looks like it's still retaining that look. And so we can play that back, and I think that looks really nice. Okay, so now we'll keep stylizing this. Let's add a gradient overlay to this. And so what I did with this in this example is I just added a gradient overlay as a layer style. And so what you can do with this is just right click, go to layer styles and choose gradient overlay. Then you'll just twirl down the gradient overlay, go to edit gradient, and then let's just choose like that kind of brightish pink that we're using. For this one, I'll sample that same color. And then in the middle, I'll add another step and then do something like a blue or something like that. I kind of like that. You can play around with the different styles, like you could do radial, angle, whatever you want. And so I'll just leave it at linear, and I might scale it down just a tiny bit. Something like that looks pretty good. Now I'll just copy this, Command C, and go to my other text animation layer, Command V to paste it on there. That looks good, and I just might go ahead and twirl that down, maybe just change the offset a little bit just so it's not exactly the same. All right, I think that looks pretty good. And of course, you can always change those up later if you want to. I might add that same layer style to my background layer. And that obviously doesn't work, so I'm going to go into my gradient overlay, maybe set the blend mode to multiply. I think that'll look pretty good. Let's see what it looks like without it. Yeah, it's kind of adding in some nice almost like reflections of those colors in there. So I think that'll work good. Okay, so we're almost there. I'm gonna add a little bit more stylization to this. I'm gonna create a new adjustment layer, Command-Alt-Y. I'm gonna call this Light Burst. Let's go up to Effect, and then scroll down to Generate, and then choose Light Burst. And you can see we're starting to get a nice light burst going on. Let's move our center point, which you can either just grab here in the center and move, or you can use these values over here. Let's just try to get those light rays to basically follow, kind of the perspective of these text layers here, something like that. And we can bump up the intensity. We can maybe bump up the ray length. And then let's change the blending mode to soft light and see what that looks like. I kind of like that. Maybe bump up the intensity some more if you want to, bump up the ray length. Just kind of really depends what kind of look you're going for, what the rest of your composition looks like. And I might just move this over a bit. We'll do maybe something like that. And the nice thing, of course, is you can also adjust the opacity on the adjustment layer if you want to, so you can really fine-tune the look that you're getting here. All right, in my previous example, I also added in this thing called a redshift, which is basically just a solid. And so I'm just going to do Command-Y to pull up a solid, and I'm just going to call this, let's do it redshift. And I'm going to make it white, hit OK, hit OK. And now let's go to right-click, go to go to Layer Styles, choose Show All. And then in your blending options, just twirl that down and twirl down Advanced Blending and turn off the green channel, turn off the blue channel. Now we have this just the red channel for this layer. So now when we go to soft light for this, you can see it's pulling out a lot of those reds that are in there, and it's giving us a really interesting look that you couldn't get just by adding a red solid. And so it's kind of it's also doing, almost kind of like a RGB split type of thing, but we're still, retaining all the look, but I think it looks kind of cool. So, and you can experiment with putting it below the light burst, putting it above, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so we're almost done here. I'm gonna add in a few animated overlays that I have. You can use whatever ones you have. I have this one called Lights, which is kind of just like a light leak type of thing. And it's just a fun little thing here. So I'm just going to probably set this to something like maybe soft light or so. Let me see what I did over here. Looks like I set it to screen. So I'll set it to screen. And then probably drop the opacity quite a bit. And it's just going to give me basically some little light leaks or something like that. I might even drop it down a bit more, just very subtle. I also have this other overlay, which is basically just some animated streaks. So I'm going to set this to add, and then I don't want as many streaks here, so I'm going to go up to Layer or Effect, then choose Color Correction, and then go down to Levels. And anytime you have like a black and white image, this is a way you can really control how much of that stuff shows up. So I'm going to pull over the darks. That's going to get rid of most of those blacks and any grays and stuff like that. I'm going to make the whites a lot sharper just by pulling the whites over. And then, it's just a matter of, kind of adjusting to taste. I want to be able to see these, but I don't want them to be, just really overwhelming. So let's see what that looks like. I think that's kind of cool. All right, so I might also drop the opacity on this down to like 50% or so. And then I'm just going to duplicate this, Command D, and then just pull it over just to make sure it goes through my entire composition. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to do a render, and then we'll come back and take a look at the final product. Okay, so here's our final render. I think it's looking great. Some nice smooth animation. The stylization looks great. And just a really cool rotating text effect with the isometric perspective. I think it looks really great. And as you can see, it was pretty super simple to pull off in only 2 keyframes. And so you can create some really awesome stuff inside of After Effects without a whole lot of effort. We could change some things if we wanted to. Like, for example, we could change up how the timing of the back layer is relative to the front layer just by moving this forward in time. Let's just see what this looks like. So just, this maybe, lines up a little bit better or something like that. We could, play around with that if we wanted to. like something like that. And then what we could do is just duplicate both of these, and then just pull them down here just so we still get that loop, and it should still loop all right. Let's just make sure. And I'm not going to re-render the whole thing, but now, maybe that effect will look a little more realistic. But at any rate, it still looks great either way, and all these changes are super easy to pull off. So yeah, that's about it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope it's super helpful for you. Get out there, create some great expressive animated typography, and I will talk to you later.